It's Toronto's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
So welcome, Eric. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You know, how you got started, that kind of, 3 or 4 minute, not elevator pitch, but your story, put into a little bottle kind of thing. Okay.
Okay. Well, what's interesting about my story, I think, is I was an entrepreneur when I was at my college time, organizing ski trips around Montreal. And then I ended up finishing my undergraduate in business, doing a BCom, and was hired by Secor, a large consulting firm in Montreal, doing some strategies for a big corporation in the time of Quebec Inc. and the QSSP program. So I ended up being exposed to lots of very successful Quebec entrepreneurs. And from that point on, ended up as a second step at Bombardier, where I was heading the strategy of the transportation unit for a while. Then moved to Cirque du Soleil and being in charge of new ventures for 5-6 years. And from that point on, I was turning 40. I was at that point of my life where I was questioning my interest into entrepreneurship. So during my years at Cirque du Soleil, I got to know a small company called Moment Factory that was helping us do some events using new technologies, projection technologies. And what was cool was that they were using the new projection technologies as a way to present the imaginary worlds of Cirque du Soleil. So at Cirque du Soleil, we didn't have to do those set designs, get the artists. So we were using those Moment Factory to help us convey those magical worlds that are those of Cirque du Soleil. And it turned out to be a great opportunity for me to switch from a large company such as Cirque to invest into Moment Factory and get back into entrepreneurship.
Okay, that's good. So, tell us a little bit about Moment Factory. How it began and some of its challenges to where it is today, kind of thing.
Well, the company was founded around the notion of events. At the time, raves were pretty important throughout the world, and Moment Factory was doing those events using the cool projection mapping technologies, using the latest technologies. And I mean, at that point, it was an event-based company. And when I joined, we tried to move from a more like cyclical, one-offs kind of projects to a more permanent base of clients with whom we could continue the development of the company, yet having a more stable base of projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a little bit different because here I am in Toronto, and you're in Montreal, and Sandra St. is our host, but we were talking earlier about a national presence and a Toronto presence for Moment Factory, but I am interested in what are the benefits of doing business, not so much in Quebec, just in Quebec, but in Canada versus sort of where media, sort of the big media lies in LA, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just interested in that.
Yeah, well, there's two angles to it. The first one is obviously being in Canada, we learn very fast as an entrepreneur that the market is not in Canada, or the bulk of the potential is outside. So you learn rapidly to be humble and try to export what you're doing. So that's been part of the approach we've taken with Moment Factory. We've been very aggressive in the way we promoted our projects through the different web tools, YouTube, Vimeo, and so on. And that has created lots of interest in our company. With regards to where we are finding the talent, I mean, historically, Montreal has always been a pretty good creative hub. With a video game industry, with the special effect industry, theatrical industry, we could bank on the talents that are around us here in Montreal. I guess the challenge right now is more that it's more and more difficult because there's so many companies in Montreal that have success. So we're at a stage where we're refusing projects because we don't have the talent, because we don't have the people to service them. So we've announced that we would open an office in Toronto and begin to be more present in Canada, so to get more visibility, to spread the news about the type of project we're doing and attract talent to Moment Factory.
Okay, so moving away from the company a bit, back to you. Some of our best ideas come when we least expect them. Okay, how do you disconnect, recharge? What do you do to come up with that next innovation?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we're three partners in this company. So it's not a one individual story. It's really about this company that has grown out of this humility of each individual that resides in the fact that we cannot deliver a project on our own. We need the help of other people around us. So the innovation, the creativity comes at the intersection of those people around the table. So it's all about encouraging ideas. It's all about encouraging innovation, pushing each other. So part of the challenge, and I think that's what I feel is interesting with entrepreneurship. It's more of a gang, a group of people approach than just a one individual notion. I prefer to use the notion of entrepreneurship as a way of being than entrepreneurship as being one individual that's pulling everybody. So I think at Moment Factory, we've been pushing very hard at creating this environment of collaboration, of pushing each other, team playing, and so on.
Just getting down to the revenue side of it, what specific tactics have helped you? You've grown yourself to a pretty big company, have helped you grow your revenue over the past, let's say couple of years, basically.
Well, the approach we've taken is obviously we're in a world of B2B essentially. So it's a contract-based company. Mm-hmm. So each project is different. Each project has its own milestones and performance parameters. So what we're doing is really developing some kind of a structure of project whereby we evaluate the price, the cost, and we build within our pricing the contingency and the different costs so that we can build the client. So the success of the company has been that we've been developing a very organized and standardized process within the company so that an individual can do a number of different projects within the same week. So the individual can work on a Madonna show as well as an airport project and so on. So what we've tried to do to scale the company was really to figure out a system underneath the project that would be strong enough and standard enough so that people could move around easily.
What's the greatest challenge you've faced in your business life to date?
Business life to date? Wow, that's...
Your entrepreneurial business life. Let's stick it down to entrepreneurial business life.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I started my career at Secor, and at the time I was consulting the big companies, so it was all about the big money, mm-hmm. and it was all about the big projects and the $100 million projects, blah blah blah. And moved to Bombardier, where it was global company, aerospace and train business. I mean, you're talking big clients, and even Cirque du Soleil was also a pretty stable company. Getting into Moment Factory at the time, my two partners were financing the company with 2 credit cards. They didn't have a line of credit.
I've done that.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the spirit of entrepreneurship, right? Yeah. So coming from a world where the whole notion of cash and availability of funds was just a question of allocation of funds, was not necessarily the question of is there funds to pay the employees, right. Is there money? So I think for me it was a very important milestone in my life, coming back to the basics of entrepreneurship. So coming back to the notion of each dollar counts.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I was lucky in my life. I was exposed to some very interesting mentors. Yvan Allaire, one of the strategy professor here in Montreal, Laurent Baudouin, Guy Laliberté, and some of those guys kind of had lots of influence on me in terms of the way to lead and the way to manage risk and the way to look at the vision. So somebody like Laurent Baudouin, for instance, would really stretch in between the balance sheet and the vision. So you would always be stretching between the two extremes. And I guess through that, you would always balance the two. You would not focus on one versus the other. It was not a matter of a group focusing on one and another group focusing on the other one. It was really about the way you're behaving, in your mindset. You always need to strike a balance in between those two poles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let's just go some fairly quick, rapid fire type questions, which means rapid answers, kind of. Okay.
Okay.
Not one worders, but don't think about it too much. If you weren't doing, what you do now, what would you be doing instead?
Well, at the time I was looking to buy a skill, because I always thought that being an entrepreneur needed to do something you love, and I'm a skier, so
Okay, I understand that. You still got time.
No, but that's very simple, because at the time when I left Soleil, I was looking for options, and it was in between Moment Factory and Sutton, the skills in the township.
Yeah.
And the two were so interesting and different and so on, but the basic of it was entrepreneurship.
Okay. What book are you currently reading?
I'm reading the Edison biography.
Oh.
And what's cool about it is that obviously Edison invented the light bulb. So for Moment Factory, it's so pertinent to understand this guy and the story of this guy, because it's why we exist today.
That's right. It is. I didn't think about that. That's true. Are there any other books that that you've read that, from entrepreneurial perspective, that you think our audience should grab and read and learn from it?
Yeah, obviously Jobs is one that's very interesting, and I mean, I'm sure lots of people have talked about it, but I guess C also is an interesting one. Mm-hmm. I love Sapiens. I'm currently reading the David Bowie biography, because as you know, Moment Factory is an entertainment company, and part of it is about the creativity and how do you push creativity in a company like ours.
Yeah.
Is also important. So those are the kind of books that I find very interesting for entrepreneurs.
If you had to pick one word, or maybe two, to describe yourself, what would it be and why?
Pushing the boundaries. I'm always looking at pushing the boundaries. I'm looking always at a way. I think the way I look at things is always, is there something I don't know I should know? Is there something beyond what's the traditional way of looking at things?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's keeping you up at night, apart from talent search?
Talent.
Is that an educational? Is that an educational thing in Canada, or is it just the sort of the U.S. just pull is too strong? Kind of.
It's a combination of things. I cannot imagine that there's one issue. I'm sure education have some difficulty adapting to these new trends. So that's A. B, obviously, I mean, the money being paid to those kids to work on these unicorns and so on. I mean, that's very difficult to compete on that basis. And I guess if we are looking at the longer run of things, we've got to continue to develop our talent, continue to push for it. And then in the meantime, making sure that those companies that we're creating in Canada, we keep them.
I mean, is it sort of a diminishment in provincial and federal government in the industry, and you know, and you know, because there's always been historically in the past, you know, you're not as old as me, but we're both old enough to know when there was a lot more tax support than there is now. Is that biting into business here?
No, well, obviously, I mean, it could help in some ways, but I think we don't do enough of a good job in promoting our successes in Canada, across Canada.
Okay.
I think if we were to show a little bit more of the successes of some of the companies here in Canada, maybe the young talent would stay here. I mean, it's very interesting once you understand more those cool little companies that are growing up in Canada, but those are the best kept secret. We tend to use the media to support more like traditional political things instead of encouraging the young folks that are not following the news to go and learn about these things. And the media, the social media, are doing an extremely good job at going global and promoting global stuff. We need to fight against that.
Okay. Moving back to you, you know, are entrepreneurs wired differently? I mean, you know.
Do they wire differently?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think so. I think so. I mean, Roger Miller, who's a professor I had the chance to work with, was telling me the entrepreneur it's not that the entrepreneur doesn't see risk, it's because the entrepreneur sees risks differently, where other people don't see the same risk. So I think part of it has to do with that. You need to, there are some risks, but you need to see the risk somewhere else, because if you see it the same way than the other, you will not be an entrepreneur.
Are you a morning or an evening person?
I used to be an evening person. I'm now more and more of a morning person.
Based on the fact that we started this at 8 o'clock this morning.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I kind of changed my routine as I was in Europe every 2 weeks for 2 weeks. So I've been sharing my time in between Montreal and Paris.
Yeah.
And given the fact that we've got an activity there, I try to maintain a morning base. And obviously, with a creative company where people show up at 9:30, 10 o'clock, it's good to be here early, so to prepare your day while the kids and the young talent are not still at the office. So that's part of the game.
I get that. You know, just moving on to a little bit more of you know, what's your favorite place in the world and why? You've been in some great places, I'm sure. You know.
I like to say to people that the Bay of Napoli, is perhaps for me the most interesting place in the world for the historical aspect, the city of Naples, Sorrento, and the history with the Pompeii and so on, and with the gorgeous islands, Ischia and Capri and so on. I mean, within a very limited area, you've got access to so many elements of life of our culture, of everything that has influenced us.
Okay. You know, moving back to you know, what are the three non-negotiables that have to happen in your case in your morning routine?
Well, I need, and I've learned that I need a good rest. So the morning, if I didn't sleep well, will be an issue. So if I start on the wrong foot because of a lack of sleep, will not be a good day. Yeah. B, a good breakfast. I when I was younger, I was starting with nothing in my stomach, and I learned that it would impact your day. So I really putting energy in making sure that I eat well in the morning. And the third thing is to know what's going to be the first thing to do in the morning. I had this great advice. You were asking me earlier about advice I got from one of my mentors. Jean-Yves Leblanc was running Bombardier Transport at the time. He said, why don't you do the toughest thing earlier in the morning? So do the tough stuff in the morning, at the first thing in the morning, so that then you feel good about it. You've done it. It's the toughest thing to do. So you need your brain to be pretty awake. Do them, and then the rest of the day will be easy. And I'm still using that recommendation.
I kind of do that myself. Yeah.
So that's why we're doing it this morning.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is something we ask everybody. Okay. So there's a beautiful tropical island in the middle of the ocean. There's only one phone booth and no internet. We drop you off there with no technology. At any time you can, use the phone booth, pick up the phone, and we'll come back and pick you up. How long do you last before you make that phone call? And what would you do?
Well, I'm a diver. So I like the notion of, and the way you were presenting it, I was picturing myself in Zamemi on the coast west of Okinawa. And you know what? I could stay there for a while without having to call anybody. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that can be alone for a while. I've got my little property where I do woods during the weekend. So I love my solitude, and it's important for me for my balance. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think I could get on for a while there.
Oh, okay. All right. That's really, that's a good, you're the first person that hasn't put a time limit on it. That's really interesting. First person I've interviewed that hasn't put a time limit on it. That's really, really interesting. Okay, Eric, we're kind of coming to the end here. Okay, but I always ask, how can, we have lots of listeners, lots of entrepreneurs, and you spark things. How can they get a hold of you? Would you want? And the other thing is, have I missed something that you want to add into this?
No, I mean, I'm always puzzled by the poor level of entrepreneurship in Canada and in Quebec and in Montreal, and I'm always puzzled by this encouragement of these one individual entrepreneurship. I think it's all about the gang. It's all about the people coming together and doing a project together. So for me, I mean, entrepreneurs should think about sharing risks with others and bouncing ideas. And that's how the best idea come up. And that's how you manage your personal drive, having other people to reinforce your ideas. So in my reading of all the most interesting successes around me in entrepreneurship, being the Baudouin family, the Bombardier family, being the Cirque du Soleil group of 6, and even Moment Factory with the 3 of us. I mean, that's really what's cool about entrepreneurship is doing it in gangs.
Mm-hmm. And can people get a hold of you, via LinkedIn, via your website?
I'm on LinkedIn, so pretty easy to connect. And on the website, my name is on the website, so it's easy. Very curious to hear more about other entrepreneurs in Canada.
Okay. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on to Canada's podcast. It's been really interesting. And talent. It's what makes us successful. I'm kind of with you.